Have you ever imagined that the worship of Jehovah, the God of Moses, may have begun long before the people of Israel existed? What if I told you that a forgotten people of the desert, the Kenites, might have been the true guardians of this ancient faith? In this video, you will dive into a shocking theory, full of mysteries and revelations that can change everything you think about the origin of monotheism. Stay with me and discover how Moses, Jethro, and the Kenites connect in a surprising, spiritual plot that challenges traditional history and reveals a desert theology full of secrets. If you've ever felt your faith needs a new perspective, this journey will bring questions and answers to transform your view of God and your path. Ready for this challenge? Then let's go. Who were the Kenites? And more could they have been? The first to worship the God Yahweh than before Israel existed? It may seem unlikely, even bold, but what if I told you there are biblical passages, like Exodus 18 and Judges 4, that raise this possibility? What if the silent and forgotten desert of Sinai hid a revelation that rewrites the spiritual history of God's people? Sounds like a conspiracy theory, right? But we're talking about the Kenite hypothesis, which proposes something surprising, that the first to bow down before Jehovah were not the Israelites ... but a nomadic, discrete people, almost erased from the great narratives, the Kenites. They had no temple, no Levites, no written law. But maybe they had the most important thing, a heart turned to Yahweh. And the most curious part? The one who leads us to this discovery is not a modern archaeologist, but none other than Moses. Yes, the same Moses who received the law at Sinai. But before that, he was welcomed by a people strange to Israel's eyes, the Midianites, relatives of the Kenites. There, in the silence of the desert, Moses met Zipporah, daughter of Jethro, a mysterious priest of Midian. And from there, well, hold on, because this is just the beginning. They were neither kings nor prophets. They had no great cities or armies. And yet, the Kenites, or Kenites, appear at decisive moments in the sacred history. Who were they, really? A nomadic people, inhabitants of the Sinai desert with strong ties to the Midianites, who were relatives by blood of Abraham with Keturah. According to Genesis 25:2, a people forgotten by wars, but remembered by God. These men and women lived in the shadows of great empires, but carried an ancient spiritual heritage. They did not write laws on stones, but seemed to keep a living and deep biblical oral tradition that connected them to the promise made to Abraham. Imagine that, amid the suffocating heat and dust of the desert, a people on the margins of history, but perhaps at the center of the original spirituality. And we're not talking about a symbolic tale. The Bible mentions them. They appear discreetly, as if hidden between the folds of the sacred pages, but always at the right moments, at times when the divine plan seemed to need a missing link. What if the Kenites, with their nomadic humility, were silent witnesses of what would come to be called monotheism? Have you noticed how the Kenites emerge discreetly, but always at moments when everything can change? In Numbers 24-21, an enigmatic prophecy speaks of them, describing their stronghold and nest in the rock, images that awaken the mystery of a people with a solid spiritual base. And who can forget the courageous Jael, wife of a Kenite, who in Judges 4 went down in history by killing Sisera, an enemy of Israel, a simple act that echoes as a symbol of a hidden divine purpose. These passages are no coincidence. They reveal that the Kenites had more than a simple nomadic existence. They played a fundamental role in the unfolding of the divine plan. Perhaps this intimacy with the worship of Yahweh the God, revealed in the Sinai desert, is a clue to understanding an ancient spirituality, a religion of the ancient Near East that was not limited to the Israelite people. And if you think this makes no difference to your life, stop and reflect. How many times do we neglect the power of those who live in the background of history? Just as the Kenites were discrete instruments of God, maybe our own journey is full of silent opportunities to impact the world, even without the spotlight. And look, that's not all. The connection between the Kenites and Moses goes further than expected. Hold on to that. Have you ever thought about where Moses found his true refuge? Fleeing Egypt, he did not seek shelter in palaces, but among the Midianites, a people closely linked to the Kenites. There, in the heart of the Sinai desert, he met Zipporah, daughter of Jethro, who was not just a tribal chief, but a respected priest of Midian. This connection reveals that spirituality outside Israel was already strong long before the law was given. Moses, after years of learning in Egypt, received spiritual and practical guidance from Jethro, a man who knew and worshipped Yahweh even before Sinai. In Exodus 18, we see Jethro advising Moses on leadership, but also participating in sacrifices to Jehovah, a clear sign of an already established faith, a pre-Mosaic worship that was far from formal Israelite control. And what does that mean for our lives today? That spirituality can be discovered and nurtured in the least expected places, among people outside the official system. Maybe you're seeking answers where everyone says there's nothing, and believe me, like Moses, you may find there an ancient wisdom capable of transforming your journey. But wait, because the real surprise lies in the Kenite theory, and it goes deeper than you imagine. What if the true origin of the worship of Jehovah was not at Sinai, but in the silent circles of the Kenites? The so-called Kenite hypothesis suggests exactly that Moses, during his exile in the desert, learned not only to survive, but to worship Yahweh alongside this forgotten people. An ancient cult, pre-Mosaic, already structured in rites and sacrifices long before the law was given. It's not just any hypothesis. In Exodus 18, Jethro offers sacrifices to Jehovah alongside Moses, showing that worship did not start with the Exodus, but already existed, with deep roots in oral tradition and desert spirituality. This pre-Israelite worship challenges the idea of a God exclusive to Israel, pointing to a pre-Israelite religious influence that shakes traditional theology. And if this idea seems confusing, think like this. Sometimes true wisdom is not only in what was passed down to us, but in what was revealed outside the walls of the known. Deep down, recognizing that Kenite worship is part of the history of faith is opening space to understand that God acts even in marginalized spirituality, in the most unlikely places. And if this already surprises you, hold on, there's more. Why do so many modern scholars insist on the so-called Kenite hypothesis? Simple, because biblical and archaeological evidence points to something bigger than mere coincidence. The fact that Jethro, the priest of Midian, already knew and worshipped Yahweh before the law at Sinai shakes traditional notions. This suggests that worship of Jehovah could have much older and broader roots than imagined. Some theologians argue that primitive monotheism did not start from scratch in Israel, but was the result of a spiritual evolution influenced by desert peoples, like the Kenites and Midianites. They call it a revelation outside Israel, a God who transcends ethnic and cultural boundaries, showing a desert theology where the sacred arises in the silence of the sands, not in palaces. But this theory is not consensual, far from it. Critics see it as a threat to the uniqueness of the Israelite covenant. However, what matters is to realize that even in controversy, the idea reinforces a deep truth. God can choose the least obvious paths to reveal himself. And this opens space to reflect on our own spiritual journey, where divine encounters may happen where we least expect. But it doesn't stop here. Why did God choose to reveal his sacred name? I am who I am. Exodus 3:14, in the Sinai desert, a dry and seemingly forgotten land? It was no accident. The desert is much more than a hostile landscape. It is a spiritual stage where silence and simplicity invite intimacy with the divine. Places like Seir, Eden, and Sinai, mentioned in Judges 5-4 and Deuteronomy 33-2, symbolize desert theology, a space where God reveals himself far from power structures and established traditions. There, among dunes and rocks, what seemed like emptiness was actually fertile ground for primitive monotheism and divine revelation outside the official system. The desert, the stage of Moses' journey, was also home to the Kenites and Midianites, peoples who guarded a forgotten spirituality, a biblical oral tradition that kept alive the connection with Yahweh. This is the essence of marginal theology. God manifests where least expected, beyond Israel's borders. For our lives, this image of the desert can be inspiring. How many times do we go through moments of emptiness and silence, and there, in the apparent nothingness, God is acting? The spirituality of the desert invites us to seek God not in crowds or noise, but in the calm and simplicity of the soul. And as we reflect on this, we begin to uncover the fundamental role of the Kenites in this story. But hold on, there's more coming. The Bible never explicitly says that the Kenites invented the worship of Yahweh, but what it reveals is much more fascinating. They were spiritual allies, silent partners in the unfolding of the divine plan. Unlike the Canaanites or Philistines, they were never condemned for idolatry, showing that their faith had a respected place, even if on the margins of Israel's official history. This biblical mystery invites us to think about the universality of God, who transcends the boundaries of the chosen people and manifests even in the forgotten peoples of the desert. The spirituality of the Kenites represents the beauty of the hidden tradition in the Bible, that silent wisdom that challenges the concept that only Israel knew the true God. And here's an invitation for you to reflect. Might your own faith need to be rescued from that spiritual silence? What forgotten spaces in your life guard an encounter with God? If this story moved you, how about continuing this journey by subscribing to the channel and activating notifications? That way, you won't miss any step of this fascinating universe we are unraveling together.